right, let's get into our first topic then. Should people addicted to junk food be treated the same as people addicted to alcohol or drugs? Do get your calls in for this one now. A leading psychologist has claimed that we are sleepwalking into a public health disaster of food addiction, despite it not being recognised as a clinical diagnosis. Dr. Jen Unwin claimed that 20% of adults in the UK would meet the criteria of a food addict, and is calling on the World Health Organization to categorise it in the same way that substance misuse is treated. Now, she says that the symptoms are the same, with food addicts having cravings and compulsions and no control over the amount that they consume, and suffering with withdrawal symptoms if they do try and cut their intake. So, should we treat food addicts in the same way that we treat drink or drug addiction? Crystal, what do you reckon?
Yes. In short, absolutely 100%. And I praise you seriously for having this spin on the conversation, because we need to move away from, it does apply to some people, but we need to move away from the general idea that if you are someone who eats to excess, and some people do just because they don't care, but a lot of people eat to excess because they have an addiction. They are doing so as an act of self-harm. And it's so rare that people actually have the conversation in this context, because what is an addictive behaviour? An addictive behaviour is a behaviour that is repeated, that is sustained, that causes you some sort of harm. Now, whether that could be drugs, meaning you lose your job, you lose your family, drink, shoplifting, all sorts of addictive sex, all sorts of addictive behaviours that you can have to your detriment, that cause harm in your life, that give you an instant satisfaction in order to escape from whatever problems it is that you have, to give you a dopamine hit, to give you a serotonin hit. And that applies to food for so many people. I would go one further and say that actually food is worse than any of the others that I have outlined, because you can live without alcohol, you can live without drugs, you can go cold turkey on all of those things whilst having therapy as to why you are carrying out those addictive behaviours. But tell an alcoholic that they can't drink, but they have to have a brandy at 10 a.m, a brandy at 2 p.m, and a brandy at 6 p.m, but still maintain a lack of addiction. It would be impossible. So we need to have a different mindset about how we see those people who are not just stuffing themselves, but self-harming with food.
But you've made a distinction there, Crystal, already between food and other addictions like drugs or alcohol, which you don't need to sustain your existence as a human being. So can it be treated the same, do you think?
Yeah, well, see, this is where sort of I differ. So definitely something needs to be done. Definitely we're needing to really address it and see it more than just, oh, you know, I can't stop eating the chocolates. But treating it as an addiction in that way, I don't think makes sense. Partly because, as you say, it's legal, it's readily available. We go into supermarkets, we're surrounded by it the whole time. So what I want to be seeing done is why is it still being advertised? Why is there not a proper sugar tax on everything? Why is eating that food easier to come by, more convenient, cheaper than eating healthier food? Those are the things that I want to see addressed, first of all. And then, you know, work on from that. I mean, just education is such an important piece. To burn 500 calories on exercise requires, you know, like over an hour and a bit of really full-on exercise. To consume 500 calories involves you picking up, you know, a sugary coffee from a coffee chain that has syrup in it, and you've just consumed that without even thinking about it as being a thing. And I just don't think people fully realise how addicted they are to sugar, how addicted they are to ultra-processed foods, and why is this stuff still being given to us? Why do we have access to this
There's a
stuff?
potential as well for just educating people more on what they're eating. Merseyside, a surgery in Merseyside tried to do this and apparently saved £100,000 just with informing people on how to eat better. So maybe that's a way of doing it.
And look, I'm all for that. I wouldn't be against anyone being educated more. But to pick up your point about it being different, there are many legal behaviours that we acknowledge can be addictions, like gambling, like alcohol, like so lots of things like that.
You don't need to
you
do
would
them to sustain.
which is why eating is worse.
Yeah.
Which is why a food addiction is worth. You can say to someone, you never can drink again, and it would be hard and it would be cold turkey, and they would require therapy as to why it is they're drinking, but they would be able to live. But when you have an addiction...
But I feel like those other industries you just mentioned there is greater control over them. You know,
still walk into a supermarket to pick up on your example and buy as much alcohol as you like and be completely tempted by it. And when it comes
But you can't have access to that to your age 18. You know, like why are kids getting access to this stuff? Listen, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to treat, to sort of, you know, say that you can be addicted in the same way. I truly believe you can be addicted in the same way. However, what they're trying to push for at the moment feels like, why are you trying to treat the problem? Why are we not going to the root cause of why this is happening?
Because the root cause is the addiction. The root cause isn't... By stopping people having access, you're actually stopping the symptom. You're not stopping the problem. What you describe, and I don't think what you describe is completely out of the question, but it's actually sorting the symptom. The problem itself is people trying to escape from their issues by eating too much. And in the same way...
I think that's a certain group of people.
Can I just say this, though? In the same way that when you have someone who is getting their hit from alcohol or from drugs, what you say is right. The alcohol or the drugs is the symptom. The problem is that you're trying to escape from it because you're sad.
Listen, I think there's
so why don't we see food the same way?
There's a certain category of people who treat food like that. But
massive category.
Yeah, okay, there's a massive category, but not like... So we say 10 million people are addicted to junk food. I think out of that 10 million people, let's say 1 million are treating it in terms of their eating their feelings and they have an out-of-control problem. I think a lot of them are just simply, you know, surrounded by this. It's really delicious and tasty. We're hardwired to want it.
Yeah.
And we drive and walk about the place and we just end up eating it.
What you're saying is we live in an
But if you're getting your
society.
dopamine hit from 9 million people from picking up a burger, that's an addiction.
Okay.
That's an addiction.
I'm going to go to the calls now. Tina from Oxfordshire, what's your thoughts on this? Do we need to treat food addicts the same way we treat drug and alcohol addicts?
I think we need a two-pronged approach. I think we need to recognise that, as your gentleman chap is saying, that it... Yeah, Christo, sorry, I know it. I watch him often. Just went out of my head. I think it is true that people are addicted to sugar, and I think that's why manufacturers put it in. And that is just to make money. So what I think we need to do is to, I'm trying to think of the right phrase. What we need to do is like have the government restricting the amount of sugar that can actually go in.
Well,
and at the same time, be giving advice to people not on what they should eat, because we've been doing that for years and it's made no difference, but on the fact of being addicted to sugar, and that it will give you an insulin high, and then as you dip down, you want it again. And so you're up and down and up and down, and it's no different at all from alcohol.
I mean, it's interesting. I think it's even more complicated than that, because it's not just an addiction to sugar, it's addiction to these things called UPFs, ultra-processed foods, which contain things that you and I probably can't even pronounce, that keep us going back for more, that stimulate those hunger.
I've got a friend who's a GP, right, and she advises on, in Buckinghamshire, she advises on the type 2 diabetes, and she says that if you can get people off added sugar and anything that their granny wouldn't recognise on the packet. So if you read it and you know your granny wouldn't know what that was, don't eat it.
But here's the complexity with that, and you're absolutely right. I'm forever now looking at the back of food packets and trying to work out what's in it, and if I can't read it, I'm more reluctant to eat it. The problem is, if you go around a supermarket, even the bread that you're likely to have in your cupboard is ultra processed. Everybody's food, everything in supermarkets other than the fresh fruit and fresh vegetables is likely to be processed. So how difficult is it for food addicts, people addicted to these ultra-processed foods, to actually go about their day in the society in the way that we've set it up? So that's why I'm wondering whether we can treat food addicts in the same way that we treat drug and alcohol addicts, because, you know, the temptation is absolutely everywhere.
It is absolutely everywhere. You're absolutely right. And one of your other panellists, she said about the fact that this food is often cheaper. And therefore, if you're on a poor diet, I mean, Dickens wouldn't believe that the poor were fat, would he, if he was alive now? Because poor people used to be thin, but they're not now, because the cheapest food makes them fat.
So
we should be taxing those things. Well, it should be incredibly expensive to get McDonald's or a kind of burger, you know? It should be incredibly expensive to have any ultra-processed food because it is causing a huge strain on the NHS.
So
it is causing people to die early. So there should be it should be unaffordable for most people.
So you would put a sort of cigarette tax on junk food and...
on everything.
But where does that end?
If you were a kid coming out of school, you know, at 3:30 and everyone's hungry at 3:30 and you walk past a whole load of fast food places, it should be unaffordable for them to go in there and buy that stuff.
Or should it be that the healthier food is cheaper? I mean, I don't know whether I'm more in favour of healthier food being way cheaper.
Well, it can go both ways.
Because now and then...
But ultimately, our brains are still hardwired to want that really delicious chips or
now
burger
and then,
or...
that's okay to have that. I mean, you shouldn't... It shouldn't
not
be
if
a
you're an
zero...
addict, Chris.
Yes, not
and
if you're an
there's
addict.
the problem is that...
But can I just say the sugar tax, though, on soft drinks, where I agree with you, is that what that actually did was it didn't mean that soft drinks became more expensive. What it meant was that the manufacturers said, right, we'll reformulate them to have less sugar. So if we could have that effect on fast food, that the fast food manufacturers so actually will recalibrate the recipe, that would be great.
I think they do something similar in Singapore with the government gets involved and actually subsidises shops that sell healthier food. Tina, so it can be cheaper. Tina, thank you very much for your call. Anne from Manchester, what's your view? Can food addicts be treated the same way a drug addict could?
Oh, I Storm. Yeah, I think they should be. I mean, I'm a food addict. I've been to health management programs. I'm on one at the moment because I wanted to actually try everything and maybe go for bariatric surgery if that was needed at the end.
Okay.
And now I've been there a year and they told me I can't have the surgery because I haven't lost enough weight.
Oh.
So I'm stuck in the middle there. So
and do you mind me asking what you're addicted to? Is it a specific type of food?
No, I don't think it is. It's just, I mean, I've gone through depression a lot for the last 20 years and I think food just makes me feel better. I think that's it, really. And there's nothing doctors can do about it. Even I went to the doctor only last week and I asked him for help. I said, and he just said, there's nothing else I can do for you.
So there's no sort of therapy or anything that they would be able to give you for that?
Well, no, I've been to therapy for things like depression and that, but they haven't helped.
That hasn't helped.
Can I just...
The only comfort I feel is in food. That's the problem.
And what can I just say to you that I hear you. I have been exactly where you are. And although my weight isn't as low as it should be now, I'm in a much better place. And can I just tell you that the willpower that you use to shut away that voice where you know you shouldn't be eating shows that you have better willpower than any normal person out there. And I have great faith that you could do it, you know, and that you could, if you are able to silence that voice that is always there, that you know in your head is telling you that you shouldn't really be eating what that is. If you can harness that voice to actually become a positive voice in your head, you can do it. Because I have, and I was in your position.
Anne?
I do understand what you're saying, but what it is like what the lady told me as well. It's like, because I'm addicted to it, it's not like cigarettes where you can just stop or alcohol where you can just stop. You go into every shop, there's food everywhere. You need
and you need to eat as well, so you can't go cold turkey. You can't lock yourself in a room for a week. You actually need to eat.
It's really hard. And then I have children, so I make food for them. So it's like nothing I seem to be able to do can stop this. I'm at a crossroads. I don't know what to do to help myself.
And I don't know how to help you. I think you're absolutely right. It needs to be professional help, and maybe actually you are the voice that we need to say, okay, it needs to be treated as seriously as alcohol and drug addiction. Thank you very much for your call. Bob from Derby, what's your thoughts on this?
Good morning. Well, my thoughts are fast food is junk food, and therefore it has to be treated that way, and I think it should be thrown out altogether. And all these fast food shops that came over here in the 1970s, am I allowed to mention names?
Well, I'd rather you didn't. It just banned,
Right,
you would just ban all fast foods.
And then I'd retrain the staff. Nobody'd lose a job. I'd retrain them into making pure food, proper food like it was before the war. before all these companies from America and all
I mean, I think some people would get very upset because although we have a large proportion of the population addicted to this sort of food, we also have a large population who are able to eat the food and enjoy the food moderately. So you would be punishing the majority for...
Well, no, because they'd be enjoying real food, like their forefathers.
So maybe
Now,
we have... our brain wiring is wrong and we're not enjoying food in the way that we should, Bob.
It needs to rewire like it did in the old days.
We're getting our dopamine from it.
Bob, thank you very much. But yeah, but why can't you get your dopamine for a good old stew or something like that? Emma from Berkshire, what's your thoughts on food addiction? Can it be treated the same way as drug addiction can?
I do think it can. I've recently had to retire as a registered nurse due to ill health. And since then, I'm finding that I am eating more just because I am bored, because I can't do a lot around the house because of the pain that I get from the osteoarthritis in my back. So I'm just eating more. I'm trying to realise what I'm eating so that I'm not sort of stuffing donuts down my throat and things like that. And I am actually going to be starting swimming lessons as of a Monday to try and lose the weight that I have put on.
Okay, Emma, it sounds like you're very conscious of your issue. It doesn't sound like it's as much of an addiction as it is boredom, as you've mentioned. And so I'm not sure it's quite the same thing, although a lot of people do eat out of boredom.
Yeah, that's a major one for me.
It's because of pain, and I think that sometimes it can be a physical pain, or perhaps in Anne's case, it can be an emotional pain. And what people like Emma and Anne and all those people, where they're being let down by the NHS, and we've had this for so many conversations, is that rather than being sent to slimming clubs, they need to be sent to therapists to find out what ways in which their pain, whatever that might be, can be sustained without it being food that's being turned to.
I mean, I suppose that would be the ideal situation, but then you've got the problem with the waiting list for mental health access on the NHS. Emma, thank you very much for calling with